You have a friend and you find out that your friend is cheating on their partner. Your friend doesn't explicitly tell you that this needs to be kept a secret, but it does kind of feel like private information. It's not something that you're going to post about online. But within the next few weeks, you keep running into your friend and their partner who's getting cheated on at all of these social gatherings, and you start getting this feeling that all your other friends are starting to change their perception of the person getting cheated on. They don't know that they're getting cheated on, but they just feel like maybe the partner is doing something wrong because there's tension in this relationship. Everybody is believing that the victim's reputation is the one getting ruined, even though they don't even know that they're getting cheated on. So now you are in a pickle. You have a few choices. Either you confront your friend and you tell them, if you don't come clean, I'm going to have to tell somebody. Or you go directly to the friend's partner so that they can make an informed decision with knowing all the facts. Or you believe, look, it's not my business. I'm not going to get involved. My friend is also the one cheating, so there is a level of loyalty. And I mean, even if you were to mention it to all the people who are judging the victim, it would just create this unnecessary drama. It's not even like you witnessed it happen. If you chose that you would rather confront your friend or even their partner privately to tell them what's going on, you are more likely to be a whistleblower, whether that be against a religious entity, a corporate organization, the government. And I don't think this is like the litmus test of whistleblowers. I do think that it's one of the many characteristics that a whistleblower has, in which you would rather suffer for the greater good. You would rather risk your own livelihood, your own social circle for the benefit of others. It's a pretty unique personality type. I'm not talking about whistleblowing in the sense of everybody's going to love and support you, because that's not really whistleblowing it is, I guess, definitionally, but it's not what whistleblowers go through. And I'm sure everyone sitting at home is going to say, I would absolutely be a whistleblower. But statistically, it is impossible that all of us that believe we would actually would. There would be a lot more whistleblowers out there. And it makes sense because whistleblowing is one of the most dangerous things that you can do.
Is this like a study research done?
Yeah, there's like a series of different moral dilemmas where you can kind of try to gauge if someone is more likely to be a whistleblower. And then there's also these very strange studies that they have found that the more educated you are, the more likely you are going to be a whistleblower. The higher in the organization you are, the more likely you are to be a whistleblower. And a lot of whistleblowers have this very interesting thing where they do not contemplate or procrastinate or feel shame about whistleblowing. Whereas a lot of people, it's a very natural human thing. When you create conflict, you almost feel like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe that was a bad idea. I don't know if this is the right thing to do. A lot of whistleblowers, they don't have that at all.
So you're saying like you're kind of born with that.
Yeah.
It's a trait that you're born with.
Yeah.
You're more likely to become one.
Yes. And I'm not saying calling out bad for bad and everybody loves you. That's a very easy thing to do. I'm talking you're going to lose your livelihood and possibly risk your life. Because there is this common misconception that truth is going to set you free. If you ask someone bad, they're going to tell you that the truth does not set you free. It sends you to prison, so shut up and lawyer up. If you ask someone who's too good for their own good, they might tell you that the truth will not set you free because it's going to get you killed. There's really no statistic on how many whistleblowers are killed, mainly because their deaths are always deemed a lone act with no foul play, even when it doesn't make sense to people. Like how two big Boeing whistleblowers died within months of each other. One of them, who happened to have already been retired after working for Boeing for 30 years, he was found suspiciously deceased at 62 years old with no indication of wanting to exit his life anytime soon. To which Boeing did say that they were saddened to hear about his passing, which feels ominous. Then a few months after that, another Boeing whistleblower is found dead from a bacterial infection. Interestingly enough, this whistleblower, Joshua Dean, he was known by everyone to be a health nut. He worked out and watched his diet with a meticulous attention to detail. He was so considerate of every small change in his body, and he suddenly contracts influenza B, pneumonia, and MRSA staph infection all at once. Which we tried researching it, and the odds of catching all three at once is extremely rare. Co-infections can occur, but all three? I mean, there seems to be only scattered reports of these triple infections, which led to people on social media writing, the new leading cause of death is being a Boeing whistleblower. It's an obvious exaggeration, but this isn't new. One of the most controversial cases in whistleblowing history is actually Karen Silkwood. She was working for this huge company operating nuclear factories. She gets out of a union meeting at a cafe. She's got a folder, a spiral notebook, a binder filled with documents. She tells another union worker she's gonna blow the lid on what the company has been doing. They were constantly leaking pipes. The protective gear is not adequate. Radioactive materials were, according to Karen, not being properly secured. But the biggest part is, Karen claims that there were between 20 to 30 kilograms, or 44 to 66 pounds, of plutonium that had been misplaced. That's enough to make 3 to 4 nuclear bombs. People theorize that there was a plutonium smuggling ring in the plant. They were also just like dumping contaminated water into a river in Oklahoma that was known to be used for swimming, fishing, and drinking. And it's very bad. And on the way with these documents to the reporter, Karen gets into a one-car accident and passes away.
One car meeting by herself?
Yes. She allegedly fell asleep at the wheel. But there are so many things that don't add up, like the damage to her bumper when it's a head-on collision that killed her. A lot of other things, like the fact that there are grip marks on her steering wheel that almost indicate that she was holding on for dear life and not asleep at the wheel, like the authorities claim. The police that found her at the scene, they work for the company when they're off duty as security guards.
What?
But more suspiciously is the fact that all of those documents that she had just showed a fellow union worker at the cafe, they are gone.
When was this?
This was like 50 years ago. This was one of the first big cases of, I don't think the whistleblower died accidentally. Her case is thick, very thick. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's been debated for half a century whether or not she was killed or it was an accident. Just like how it's being debated whether or not the Boeing whistleblowers were killed or if they self-exited or naturally caught 3 infections at once. But does that really mean every time a whistleblower passes that it's a self-exit, as authorities and major corporations claim? What if a lot of powerful people want someone dead? Does that factor into the investigation? Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims, but also an advocate and a survivor who had been taking Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell down, along with Prince Andrew. She is the one in that very famous picture of Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell. There is 17-year-old Virginia Giuffre with Prince Andrew's hand creepily around her waist. That is her. March 2025 of this year, Virginia Giuffre gets into a really bad car accident. At this point in Virginia's life, she has 3 children. She has helped put Epstein in jail. She lived through him mysteriously dying in prison, which, by the way, she was on the fence about whether he was killed or not in prison. She helped put Ghislaine Maxwell in jail. She had just finished a manuscript for a book, a memoir, detailing her entire 2 years being trafficked by Epstein and Ghislaine to powerful people such as Prince Andrew, but other world leaders like a prime minister of a foreign country, US politicians, senators, governors. She has the manuscript. It just hasn't been published yet. It won't be published until she's dead. Virginia Giuffre has been working with a collaborator for this book. The collaborator is not only helping with some writing aspects, but she's been adding footnotes, hiring professional fact checkers, trying to do her best to protect Virginia, but also publish a book that has all the accurate information. She says that she gets a call, March 2025, so earlier this year. Virginia's in the hospital from this car accident. The accident makes the news because even Epstein's death just seems suspicious. This accident too seems so suspicious. What do you mean? Virginia goes into kidney failure. The doctors originally give her 4 days to live. She states that a school bus had hit her, turning her car into a tin can. She states that when the police were called, they said that nobody was available to come to the scene, and now she's in the hospital in critical condition. A picture of her just bruised face is posted online. But it's odd because police later come out and confirm, yeah, there was an accident, but there were no injuries reported at the scene. And the picture of her in the hospital seems weird because a lot of healthcare workers are coming out and saying, why is she wearing a necklace? And the bruises, they look a few days old, and she would be hooked up to a lot of machines if she were in kidney failure. And so what does this mean? Some netizens initially believed that Virginia had faked her injuries. But like, why would Virginia do that? Like, none of this makes sense. Virginia tells Amy Wallace, her collaborator for the book, very cryptically, if it's in God's hands, I'm not scared. If it's my time to go, it's my time to go, but I want the book published. Amy writes in the book, But she's like, I don't know. I want you around for the rest of my life. And so they tell each other that they love each other and they hang up. The next day, April 1st, 2025, Amy Wallace and Virginia's publicist both receive an email. This is Virginia's last email to them. It reads in short, "In the event of my passing, I would like to ensure that Nobody's Girl is still released. I believe it has the potential to impact many lives and foster necessary discussions about these grave injustices." That email is sent out April 1st, 2025. By the end of the month, April 25th, 2025, Virginia Giuffre will be found dead. But this is not the first time Virginia Giuffre has almost predicted her own passing, if you will. Years ago, she tweeted, "I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I wanting to self-exit. I have made this known to my therapist and my GP. If something happens to me, for the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me protect them. Too many evil people want to see me quieted." Which, yeah, sure, okay, a lot of things can change in a few years, including someone's mental state. But with the Epstein case and the Epstein files, everyone feels like a suspect. I mean, everybody has money, everybody has power, and everybody has a lot to lose if this book gets published. We would like to thank today's sponsors who have made it possible for Rotten Mango to support the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, aka CAST. They are the U.S. largest provider of comprehensive direct services to survivors of human trafficking and advocating for groundbreaking policies and legislations. This episode's partnerships have also made it possible to support Rotten Mango's growing team, and we'd also like to thank you guys for your continued support. And as always, full show notes are available at rottenmangopodcast.com. With that being said, this episode involves mentions of DV, self-exit, CSA, trafficking, a few more disclaimers. I want to be clear that the allegations mentioned in this video are not allegations being brought forth by the RM team. We are only repeating what has been circulating online. These allegations are readily available for anyone to research and to come to their own opinions and conclusions. Many of the allegations are from Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir. It's called Nobody's Girl, and I highly recommend getting a copy. I went through and I color-coded a lot of the people that kept coming up. I took notes. There's just so much in this book that's not even going to be included in these episodes. There's so much to learn, not even just about this case, but what it means to try to support victims of trafficking. And there's a lot to gain, there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to support in here. As well as I would even check out Virginia's brother, Sky, who she writes so fondly about in her book. He has been very vocal about getting justice for his sister, even after her passing, and making sure that we see the day of the Epstein files. So many of the allegations are from her posthumous memoir, as well as publicly available netizen comments, and any theory should be taken as a conspiracy theory. We are simply trying to provide a compilation of all the online theories and or speculations in an easy to digest video format so that you can do your own supplemental research before coming to your own opinion about something or someone. That is not to say that we personally believe or don't believe something. We are just not accusing anyone of anything in this video. Our personal private opinions about someone should not be taken as fact. We are just trying to present the different types of publicly available online discourse for you to consume. And as well, November of this year, so a month ago, 20,000 pages of the Epstein files were dumped by the House Oversight Committee. There are emails in there that have connected more people to Epstein, along with high-profile professors, businessmen, politicians, including our current U.S. President, Donald Trump. Whether these connections are implications of something much darker, I think especially when it comes to the political figures, everyone's going to have a differing opinion. I'm not here to sway one's opinion. I'm not here to make you believe one thing or another. I am just here to summarize all the people that were implicated in the late Virginia Giuffre's memoir, as well as the emails in the recent document dump. And I'm just trying to get you more familiar with what's going on before the DOJ is legally required to release all the Epstein files this month. So December 19th, 2025 is the date as mandated by the Epstein Files Transparency Act. What does that mean? The bill requires that the DOJ publish in a searchable and downloadable format all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials in the DOJ's possession that relate to the investigation and the prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. This includes materials that relate to Ghislaine Maxwell, who's still alive and in jail and apparently has a puppy. Flight logs, travel records, individuals named and or referenced, including government officials in connection with the investigation and prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. The DOJ is only allowed to withhold certain information, such as the personal information of victims and materials that would jeopardize an active federal investigation. Okay, the second part is very important because it's been very clear from the get-go that members of the DOJ do not care about the victims, but that second part could be the potential loophole that would prevent yet another release of the Epstein files. It is required that the DOJ report to Congress all the information that is released and withheld, as well as a summary of any redactions that are made and a list of all government officials and politically exposed individuals named or referenced in the published materials. So this could either be the great expose and the great cleanse, or it could just be another fake out where we get nothing but a messy dump with emails referring to people whom we already assumed are connected to Epstein. So now we have some evidence of that connection, but it's very unlikely as of right now anything will come out of it. So with that being said, hopefully these videos give you current updates that will give you a full idea before the files drop. I don't think anyone is unfamiliar with this case, but if you are, we do have a multi-part series deep diving into Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Epstein's Island that you can refer to. So with that being said, let's get started. Getting evicted is usually an experience that I feel only commoners have to deal with or live in fear of. It's typically not something that the ultra wealthy or Nepo babies have even briefly thought about. It's not even a brief flashing thought that they've had in their brain, especially if you are the Prince of England. That is until October 30th, 2025. Something very rare, very interesting happens. An official royal communications is released. A statement from Buckingham Palace. His Majesty, King Charles, has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and honors of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, along with royal communications. It's more of like an eviction notice, this entire thing. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease, and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. AKA, Prince Andrew will just be Suspicious Andrew, and he's getting evicted. The public responded as expected with this news, with most stating that it's a little too damn late for that. Others point out that this is fascinating because it's Prince Andrew's brother, King Charles, technically approving this entire statement. One as in comment reads, tell me you believe that your brother is guilty without telling me that you believe your brother is guilty. But mostly there's a lot of shock with the comment continuing. Like others, I did not think that this would happen. Titles removed, sure, but kicked out of the house and home? That I really did not expect. The wording is much harsher than even I also expected. I imagine the royals would kind of beat around the bush if they were to even do anything this extreme. But the word choice of notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations, it's more likely that you would hear something like, while he maintains his innocence. But this sounds like, hey, you're saying that it's not true, but nobody believes you, including me.
Wow.
Others are expressing disappointment that Virginia Giuffre, the victim who initially exposed Prince Andrew, is deceased and is not around to see this. With a comment reading, I wish Virginia knew that her bravery is still finally seeing results. She deserved justice in life, and she still deserves it even though she's gone. Her and all the other victims of these heartless people. But most netizens are left wondering, okay, why now though? Why now specifically? A lot of people in the UK will say, well, the Queen was never going to do it. Everyone in the UK knows that Prince Andrew was the Queen's favorite child, apparently. But King Charles, there's no love lost there. Others are saying maybe King Charles is doing it so he can clean up all the loose ends, so when William takes over, King William, soon to be King William, he can start fresh. But others are saying, well, it might be happening because of what's happening in the US right now, and they believe it's only a matter of time. They might be right to think that, because a few weeks after that, The royal announcement, November of this year, thousands of Epstein documents, including emails between Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, are released in a Google Drive by the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. 20,000 something pages, large sets of emails, all dumped online for the public to see, with more to be released this month as mandated by that new bill. The hope being that, finally, this Epstein list will be released. Because, everybody has an idea of a list. There are random lists online going out where people keep adding names once they keep getting associated with Epstein when there's pictures resurfacing. But a real, reliable list of every single name connected to Epstein and Maxwell, that's what we're hoping for in December. So here's a rundown of what we know so far before that release. These are the people, the high-profile people that have been connected to Epstein and Ghislaine and the trafficking ring, and why the internet believes that many of them need to be investigated and thrown into a cell with the key dumped into the freaking Pacific Ocean. Some of these names are going to sound oddly familiar, and they have always been associated with Epstein and Ghislaine. Others are going to have been loosely connected, but now with renewed interest in this case, with the Epstein files being dropped, new emails being revealed, and even Virginia Giuffre's memoir that was published posthumously. These people have been more present in the news in connection with Epstein. So consider this a guide of all the people, places, and things that you may need to know before the documents drop, and why many of these people could be someone, theoretically, hypothetically, that would want the files to be suppressed, who would want Virginia to be silenced, who will probably try their best to make sure we never know what happened. It's better to put a name and face to these people rather than say, hey, they're making sure they never get justice. So exactly which rich and powerful people are we talking about? Like I said, we've already done a multi-part series on Epstein and Ghislaine where we did talk a lot about Virginia Giuffre, but just a quick refresher, Virginia Giuffre spent more than 2 years traveling with Epstein and Ghislaine. She was one of the most high-profile survivors considering she has been very outspoken against Prince Andrew. She has been very passionate for advocating for the end of trafficking and for exposing the elite for what they've done. She's also spent a great deal of time at Epstein's Island, and she says in her book, quote, I knew their cruel habits and those of the men to whom they trafficked me. I saw these men. I endured them up close. She says that she recalls being trafficked to, quote, the former governor of a Western state, a respected U.S. senator, and so many scientists. And as I've said, usually when I was trafficked to these men, Epstein didn't introduce us or tell me their names or their titles. Some critics have insinuated that there's no way I could remember these men, given the Xanax and the alcohol that I sometimes relied upon to survive in those years. But to them, I simply say this. When a man has been on top of you, his face just inches from your own, you remember him. You may not remember the exact day, date, or time that the man abused you, but his face stays in your mind even when you wish it wouldn't. She writes, seeking to silence me, my powerful enemies have threatened to bankrupt me and even to have me killed. I haven't stopped talking. When I was a sex slave, I had no say. I've promised myself that I will never have no say again. These are the main people that she has named in her book that she states she has been trafficked to. I remember when I worked in retail, we were told repeatedly through training that we were to never assume one's familial relation to the person that they walk in with. That is the very professional way of saying, hey, don't assume that the man is the dad and the girl is the daughter because they could be dating. Now, obviously, this is not for when one party appears to be underage or in distress. That's clearly a different set of training rules. This is for when you see some 25-year-old walking in with someone who looks to be about 60, who looks old enough to be their father. That's what that applies for. Thankfully, most of these couples know that they will likely confuse retail workers, so they'll typically establish some sort of relationship. They'll have a little show of hey, we're not actually dad and daughter. But there have been times where mistakes have been made. But every single person in this Gap Kids store that Virginia Giuffre walks into should know what's going on. They should be able to tell that Virginia was indeed a minor, and she was indeed not shopping for clothes with her grandfather. Even though he looks like her grandfather, he's in his 60s, and she looks to be 14, 15. And technically, this is Gap Kids, so all of this checks out. However, no grandfather is going to passionately persuade his granddaughter to pick the shortest tops that show her entire stomach and the smallest shorts that are not even in her size to show half of her bottom. There's just no way that's her grandpa. And they're right, because it's not her grandpa. This is Ron Eppinger. This is the second man that traffics Virginia Giuffre. The first man is Virginia Giuffre's own father. She alleges that he traffics her to a family friend. And the third being Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Ronald Eppinger is the founder of Perfect 10 modeling agency, which I don't foresee any of this sounding like a life-altering revelation, but Perfect 10 was not a legitimate modeling agency. Though if you were to briefly look into it, it might look like one because they do have professional stylized photo shoots, collaborations with brands. They have models who would be hired to walk runways. But that's not the purpose of the agency. This is a highly predatory, highly profitable business structure in which Ron Eppinger would go hunt down young women from Eastern Europe, bring them to Florida, and run a $1,000 a night escort service. He usually only preyed on European children until he meets Virginia. Virginia had just run away from Growing Together, which we'll get to more later, but it's essentially just another predatory facility that helps parents kidnap their own kids to stick them in this facility to make them more obedient, more teachable, more moldable, more whatever adjective parents want to pay for. It's obviously not a great place with assault, violence, SA being heavily present, and even just the psychological torture. Virginia says they would force the girls that are 13 to maybe 17 years old to stand in front of a mirror and passionately berate themselves at the top of their lungs. She says that they were forced to scream at their own reflections, "I am a whore, a slut, a druggie," while staring into their own eyes. I mean, it's basically a torture prison. They even have a solitary confinement cell. I mean, it's a sick experiment. Virginia recalls that every Wednesday they would have nasty mushroom soup. You're forced to eat everything on your plate every day, even if you hate it. Virginia hates mushroom soup, or at least she hates this variation of it. And most Wednesdays, she would be able to push through, but one particular Wednesday, she feels like she needs to throw up. The guard is screaming at her to eat, and Virginia says, quote, "But after a few spoonfuls, it wouldn't stay down, and I vomited into my bowl." The guard's face broke into a sadistic smile. "No problem," she said. "Now eat until that bowl is empty." Virginia ends up running away and hitchhiking just to get anywhere far away from Growing Together because Growing Together, they're going to find you and they're going to bring you back to the ninth circle of hell. Virginia just ends up staying at a guy's house. They were smoking weed on the beach together and he offered, which it's not like she has a lot of choices at this point. She's a 15-year-old runaway. And she says, "I was worried that he wanted sex, but I was wrong. When we got to his place, we just smoked some more pot and then he found me a clean towel so that I could take a shower. Please be gone by the morning," he said before he went to go to bed. "I go to work early and please don't fuck up my house. Do the right thing." Virginia writes, and quote, "Not all men are monsters." The next person that she ends up hitchhiking with he is a man who appears to be a construction worker. He claims that he's going to the same place that she's going, but when she looks up, he's driven to a parking lot of a motel and he tells her, "Come upstairs with me. It's only going to take a second. I owe somebody money. I need to pay them back." She follows him up and immediately when he closes the door to the motel room, it's too late. He pulls out a gun, jams it into her mouth, and essays her. She says, quote, "From the front first, then from the back." He would choke her until she lost consciousness, only to choke her again when she comes to. And then his phone rang mid-assault. He threatens to kill her if she runs away, but also she's thinking he probably will anyway, so she books it. And that's how she ends up sitting on a curb in Florida, trying to block out all this trauma, trying to figure out how not to go back to Growing Together or the house that she states that she was being essayed in when this very fancy limousine pulls up right in front of her. And I say states because her dad has been very vocal and has been denying the allegations. So just legally speaking, but personally, I mean, I have opinions. This limo pulls up right in front of her and the window rolls down and it's this old wrinkly man. He's balding and he's eyeing her up and down. "Oh, you poor baby." Virginia looks inside and next to this old balding man, there's this very young girl who looks about Virginia's age in this very short red dress. And she's staring and she's smiling at her and they seem kind of friendly. The man sounds like a grandpa. "Come in here so we can take care of you." Ron Eppinger tries to get Virginia to trust him by way of sympathy. The textbook, "I am a sad, vulnerable old man. How could I ever harm someone when I'm so fragile myself?" He tells her, "I had a daughter once, Susan Marie. She died when she was 15. She was in a truck. The driver fell asleep and crashed into a utility pole in Pompano Beach. I've never gotten over it, you know." Virginia says in her book, "And for that moment, I feel sorry for him. That's when he reaches for me and strokes my hair. If you want, I can be your new daddy." This is how Virginia Giuffre starts getting trafficked by Ron Eppinger. He starts a new string of felonies by taking Virginia to a restaurant to eat, where she says she eats like an animal because she's starving, and then to Gap Kids to shop for her, buying clothes that, at that point, why even shop at Gap Kids? These clothes barely cover her. Then takes her to a lingerie store where it appears that the workers know Ron Eppinger because they don't look at all confused at why this much older man that has not one hair to his name on his bald head, why he is purchasing a G-string underwear for someone who appears to have just left a middle school bus. They don't bat a single eye. And he picks out every lacy thing before taking Virginia back to his house where there are at least 5 other girls, alarmingly young, probably minors, fully unclothed and or almost fully there. Then he takes Virginia to his room, which horrifyingly has a circular bed and a mirrored ceiling, and he announces that she's going to be sleeping with him tonight. He called her baby, and Virginia writes in her book, "I am the youngest girl there, so the nickname sort of fits. I want to become someone new so badly that I accept it. Baby is now who I am." Which I don't think any of you would ever say, but if anyone were to say something inherently as brain dead as, well, why would she get into this man's limo? Which honestly, I think questions like that should be part of some sort of standardized test to determine one's comprehension level. But if you were to ask such a thing, please remember, Virginia says, "This is just some of what I've been through before I met Eppinger. Perhaps it explains why I so readily got into a limousine with an old man I didn't know. It wasn't just that I'd been brutally essayed a few hours before, barely fleeing with my life. No, I had felt worthless for years. Sometimes I worried that what the counselors at Growing Together made me say was true, that I was a whore, a slut, and a druggie." Which clearly we all know, and Virginia knew eventually, is not the case. Because Ron Eppinger is clearly the problem. Virginia states that not only did Ron Eppinger target children, he wanted them to look more like children. According to Virginia, before he demanded intimate relations, he would force her to shave, he wanted her to resemble a teen Barbie doll, and then told her that she needed to watch X-rated content and be grateful to him for letting her, a child, sleep with him, a 63-year-old balding predator, because, quote, "he was teaching me a valuable skill, how to please men." What's frankly bizarre about this entire situation is that Virginia states that he would drive her around South Florida in his convertible because he liked to show off his fast car and a girl in the passenger seat, in my humble opinion, to cover up for his lack of manhood downstairs and what other laughable condition he may have. But according to Virginia, he would require that she be topless. And she clearly looks like a child. Nobody notices, nobody pulls them over, nobody arrests Ron Eppinger. Some people can't even drive to Target to run errands without getting pulled over. And you're telling me Ron Eppinger is just doing a full bus tour of the city showcasing his crimes and nobody says anything? I'm sure there are police cars all around the street where they drive around. They haven't driven past one patrol officer?
Or anybody who makes a call or do something about it.
Exactly. Ron Eppinger, he just gets away with it for so long. Virginia makes a clarification in her book that in some reports, including a widely read book on Epstein, and I think that these clarifications are so important. There's so many clarifications throughout the book, and it's very interesting to see what the media got wrong because, this case is so heavily talked about. And she states that in one widely read book on Epstein called The Perversion of Justice, the Jeffrey Epstein story, the author, who is a journalist, she writes about how Virginia was swept away by Ron Eppinger's lifestyle, seeing other girls get expensive clothes and jewelry. And Virginia starts thinking, the lifestyle isn't just exciting. Maybe it's an acceptable way to earn a living. Which, even if that were the case, Virginia was 15 at the time. But Virginia says that's not the case. She says, quote, "I wasn't excited. I was a defeated, hopeless child. I knew what was happening wasn't right." Virginia writes, in fact, quote, "Soon after Eppinger began trafficking me to his friends, I knew how it felt like to be a puppy picked from a litter, just hoping its new owner wasn't the whipping kind. I was merely trying to survive." Virginia states that she was held captive for 6 months before she was, quote, "given away to Ron Eppinger's friend," who embodies the phrase, "birds of a feather flock together." He's heinous too. And in 2011, Ron Eppinger finally pleads guilty to charges of, quote, "smuggling aliens to the US for the purposes of sex work." And the consequences of that, 21 months in prison and a $6,000 fine.
What?
Also, he would have to forfeit his beloved limo and his boat. There are speculations that the FBI knew what he was doing for a really long time and just let it happen. There is a massive file released by the DOJ. It's in the FBI vault on Ronald Eppinger. It's a good starting point to go down if you're really interested, but there is a large amount of things redacted from that file, so keep that in mind. And it just makes people wary because is that what the Epstein files is going to look like in a few weeks when it's released with everything redacted? Virginia's dad is a maintenance man at the massive country club, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, infamously owned by Donald Trump.
That's crazy, really.
Virginia's dad was in charge of making sure all the red clay tennis courts were suitable for very wealthy people to play on, which is not an easy job. Wealthy people love to complain. And that is when Virginia is 17 years old. She's desperate. She needs a job. She asks her dad, if you can help me get something at Mar-a-Lago. She applies for a position as a locker room attendant. She says, quote, my duties in the locker room were to, make tea. I've never made tea before, so that was fun. Learn how to make tea. Clean up after the ladies who had just been in the locker room. Make sure the bathrooms were kept nice and tidy. You fold the toilet paper into a little triangle every time anyone went to the toilet. Clean up the sink area. It was a very crazy job. Crazy enough that just to be folding toilet paper and making tea, they make Virginia undergo a drug test, which, okay, standard, fine, right? But also like a polygraph. For what reason, I don't know.
What?
When you get hired at the Mar-a-Lago, I guess you have to undergo a polygraph.
Huh.
Nevertheless, she starts working there. She's studying the employee handbook, which is this hefty 65-page filled to the brim with half rules, half digs at people. So instead of writing things like, please maintain personal hygiene, it reads things like, body odors are offensive, even down to the ear accessories. 1 per lobe, each no larger than a dime. Which Virginia says the rules actually made her feel better. She said it felt good to work at a place that was serious, because she hoped people would take her seriously. She actually gets very inspired working there, and she says that seeing how calm and de-stressed all the guests appear, which, makes sense considering Mar-a-Lago is, regardless of opinions, objectively a very exclusive club to get into. The initiation fees are in the hundreds of thousands, and it would make sense that the average net worth of a member would be at least a few million, but there are a lot of members that are worth billions as well. So yes, they should seem really relaxed. But at the same time, Virginia says she wants to work her way up to being a masseuse so that maybe she could, quote, make a living by helping others reduce stress. I believed I might finally leave my abusive past behind. Now, at Mar-a-Lago, she meets Donald Trump. And I will say, as an American, the mere mention of Donald Trump's name, who happens to be the president, makes people break out into a sweat for vastly different reasons. And I'm not here to convince you of one thing or another. I think I've made my political stance pretty clear over the years, but we try as a team on RM specifically to make sure that the main message of each video, though, I do believe that our bias do tend to creep in, politically speaking, not because of our lack of trying, but because we are quite passionate outside of these episodes. But for this episode specifically, we are going to try to swim across the Pacific and try to take out all the political opinion. There are a lot of great channels that cover the topic in depth with a lot of political insight and opinions. Great channel is, again, subjective. What I think is great, you might not think is great. I don't think that those channels are lacking from any platform. But our intention is that this serves as a deep dive so you can see the social commentary or the feelings behind each person named and listed instead of me just telling you how I feel about it. It should, in theory, give you a much clearer vision of all the things that are being said out there online. So if we just showcase our thoughts and feelings, it would not be as broad of a view. So with that being said, Virginia does meet Donald Trump. Thank you to Netflix for sponsoring this portion of today's episode. As many of you guys know, I spent months researching and producing our 4-part series on Sean Diddy Combs. And honestly, it was one of the most complex stories that I've ever covered. And I think it changed everything that I thought I knew about him. Like, I knew Sean Combs' name. I was familiar with the headlines. But when we dived deep into his very extensive lore, there were things that I just never heard about. The City College stampede where 9 people died, the club shooting in New York, the murders of Tupac and Biggie that are somewhat connected, if you will. I mean, that's where things got really dark for me. I went down so many rabbit holes trying to understand this East Coast, West Coast rivalry, all the theories, the accusations, and the conspiracies. And there is still so much that we don't know definitively. Sean Combs' lore is basically just tragedy on tragedy, and then at the very end, somehow, Sean Combs is always the last man standing. Especially in our podcast series when we covered his recent trial. But honestly, I keep thinking that there is still so much of this lore that needs to be told, and that is exactly what Netflix's new docuseries does. It is not just about the trial. This is a comprehensive look at Sean Combs' entire life, starting from his childhood in Mount Vernon, New York, where he was raised by a single mother, Janice Combs, right as rap is like exploding into the mainstream, featuring never before footage that gives you an inside look at Diddy's life, explosive firsthand accounts from people who were actually there, former friends, collaborators, rivals, people who witnessed his rise in this entertainment industry up close. You're going to hear about his time as a 19-year-old intern at Uptown Records, the beginning of what would become his very signature wild lifestyle. And then there's the founding of Bad Boy Records with Kirk Burroughs, who's in this Netflix's exclusive release. He actually opens up about their relationship in a way that he has never done before. And as Diddy is climbing higher and higher into the entertainment sphere, you see how his ambition and his hunger for power just like evolves and twists. It's incredible. I mean, the Netflix is bringing you the story of Sean Diddy Combs, tracing his journey all the way up to the present day. The most exciting part about this new release is that we actually get to hear from the jurors in the trial, which is, of course, for legal reasons, is not a perspective we had access to during our trial series. And I'm genuinely so curious to hear what they have to say. This is the full story of Sean Diddy Combs, the entire arc of his life, his lore, his career, and his influence on music and culture. Sean Combs, The Reckoning, is now playing only on Netflix. She is introduced by her dad, and she says, "Trump couldn't have been friendlier, telling me it was fantastic that I was there. Do you like kids?" he asked. "Do you babysit at all?" He explained that he owns several houses next to the resort that he lent to friends, many of whom he had children who needed tending to. I said, yes, I had babysat before. She says, "Soon I was making extra money a few nights a week minding the children of the elite." That is, until one day, there's a car driving behind her, slowly, on the property, Mar-a-Lago property. The car has tinted windows and a man in the front, Juan Alessi, the driver, and in the back is just one Mar-a-Lago member, Ghislaine Maxwell. Virginia writes that she never even knew that this car spotted her walking to work until way later. But, quote, "I didn't know it yet, but once again, a predator was closing in. This one, however, would prove different from any I've met before. This was an apex predator, as greedy and demanding on the inside as she appeared to be beautiful, pleased, and self-assured on the outside. Again, I wish I could say that I saw through Maxwell's polished facade, that I felt the immense threat she posed to me. Instead, my first impression of Maxwell was the same one that I formed when I greeted any well-heeled Mar-a-Lago guest. Quote, I'd be lucky, I thought, if I could grow up to be anything like her." Virginia doesn't meet Ghislaine Maxwell until one day the other girl that works at the spa can't be at the front desk. So instead of tending to the locker room, suddenly Virginia's at the front desk. And it's so slow, she's just reading her book on massage therapy because, again, her dream is now to become a masseuse. And then she looks up and there's this woman with a hideous bob and a British accent. Virginia doesn't stoop so low to call Ghislaine's bob hideous. In fact, I guess you could say Ghislaine's bob is objectively chic, I guess, if you are threatened with a weapon, but f*** Ghislaine and f*** her hideous bob, okay? And her bag that probably cost more than Virginia's dad's car is how Virginia sees it. But she shakes Virginia's hand and introduces herself as Ghislaine Maxwell. She looks down at Virginia's massage book. "Are you interested in massage? How wonderful. Do you massage on the side?" Virginia says she starts freaking out because she's like, oh, no, I don't want to give this person the wrong impression. Like, I'm not even trained, but I hope to learn someday. I'm sure you'd be terrific. Ghislaine tells her that she's friends with a very wealthy man, also a member of the Mar-a-Lago Club, who is looking for a massage therapist who can travel with him. Will you come in for an interview? Virginia's hesitating, but Ghislaine picks up on it and tells her it's not about what she knows right now. It's about her determination to learn. If she can impress this wealthy rich man, he would be more than happy to fund her training sessions. He's a mathematician. He's got this knack for making money and he loves helping people. Besides, he lives right here in Palm Beach, just 2 miles from the club. Come meet him tonight after work. Virginia writes in her book, even today, more than 20 years later, I remember how excited I felt. If you've watched our previous deep dives on the Epstein case, you are familiar that Virginia excitedly tells her dad about this life-changing opportunity. He drives her to the house where she's taken into the massage room where an old hairy man is laying naked, face down. Ghislaine instructs her on how to massage him. Virginia describes in the book, quote, when we got to his buttocks, I tried to glide past them, landing on his lower back. But Ghislaine put her hands on top of mine and guided them to his rear. It's important that you don't ignore any part of the body, she said. If you skip around, the blood won't flow right. They, both Ghislaine and Epstein, assault Virginia. Virginia writes that this is the moment something cracked inside of me. Epstein and Maxwell laughing at my underwear, which were dotted with tiny hearts. How cute, she still wears little girl panties, Epstein said. So they force Virginia to massage Epstein, then they assault her, and then they force her to wash Epstein in the shower, shampoo, condition his hair, while Epstein gives her just one of many countless lectures. Virginia says, from the first meeting, Epstein wanted me to regard him as a mentor and not a predator. He would give lessons on game theory, AI, just like anything that is mind-numbingly, he just wanted to be the smartest person in the room. And then afterwards, Virginia is forced to pat him dry with a towel before they lead her outside with 2 $100 bills shoved in her hands. And they're smirking as they tell her, this is probably what you make in a week at that spa. And the driver takes her back home. Virginia says the entire car ride, all I knew as the black Suburban headed west was that I felt gutted, as if someone had reached down my throat and scraped out my insides with a silver spoon. Also, another thing to note, perhaps clarify, is that everyone in the media was under the impression that the house was white. Virginia writes in her book that was years later. In the summer of 2000, the home we pulled up to was a garish pink, the color of Pepto-Bismol. Yeah, the house was painted all pink. And this is his Palm Beach house. And Virginia explains, Epstein took delight in explaining to me, for example, that he had painted his house pink because I love pink. Pink is for pussy. And later, quote, Epstein liked to tell friends that women were merely a life support system for their private parts. He also apparently stated, I'm not a sexual predator, I'm an offender. It's the difference between a murderer and a person who steals a bagel. This is how Virginia becomes a prisoner of Epstein and Ghislaine for the next 2 years. She writes, my job was to do whatever they asked, whenever they asked it. There were no bars on the windows or locks on the doors, but I was a prisoner trapped in an invisible cage. For a few weeks, maybe months, Virginia is balancing work at Mar-a-Lago and then going to Epstein's house to train for massages. It's very complicated and understandable. It's like a psychological response. She's been essayed already, so she's been traumatized. She feels gutted. However, they keep charming her to come back and promising her that this isn't for nothing. If you keep doing well, we're going to get you officially trained so that you can quit this job and become a masseuse. If she stops now, then all of this trauma she endured would be for nothing. But if she comes over a few times, maybe they would pay for her to get trained. So under this very complicated feeling, she keeps going back. And she says in short, and again, please read her book, but in short, she explains, as Epstein used me to satisfy his perverse appetites, I rationalized that perhaps he might also help me to better myself. In those initial weeks with Epstein and Maxwell, I told myself I could weather this too, and maybe even come out ahead. Virginia goes there to massage Epstein when he finally asks, how about you quit your job at Mar-a-Lago and work for me full time? He gives her a wad of cash, $2,500. This is like the most 17-year-old Virginia has ever seen. Rent yourself an apartment. It's not like she jumps at the chance to work for him. She admits it felt foolish to rely on him for my livelihood. Epstein must have sensed my qualms though, because he walked around his desk, picked up a grainy photograph and handed it to me. The image had been taken from some distance, but it was unmistakably my little brother, Sky, the one that I was telling you about to go follow. He was walking away from the camera. I could see his backpack and the outline of the side of his face. I felt a stab of fear. Why did Epstein have a photo of the person I loved most in the entire world? Epstein tells her that they know where her brother goes to school and, quote, "You must never tell a soul of what goes on in this house. And I own the Palm Beach Police Department, so they won't do anything about it anyway." Virginia leaves Mar-a-Lago as her place of employment, and this is going to be a huge part of the Epstein and Donald Trump saga. If you're not familiar, in the massive Google Doc dump, there are multiple emails between Epstein and others that consistently reference Donald Trump. Depending on which aisle of the political party you're on, you will have very different interpretations of said emails. I'm going to try to do my best to aggregate both sides' opinions and sentiments to give you a full picture of what's going on and what people are thinking about it. We went to channels of well-known left-wing commentators as well as right-wing commentators as well as mainstream media networks along with Reddit to see what comments people were having from both sides and opinions. And it's just vastly different. And we went through hours of trying to see, okay, well, is there at any point people come to some sort of agreement on any topic? And no, there is not. I don't think it would be productive for me to even try to get you to come to a point. So you got to come to your own points at this point. One email from Epstein to Ghislaine in 2011 reads, "I want you to realize the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redacted victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there." The redacted...
What does 75% there mean?
We don't know. A lot of these emails are just like all over the place.
Okay.
Now, the redacted victim has since been released as being Virginia Giuffre. Many netizens believe that this implicates Trump, placing him at the same place in Epstein's house, of all places, with a victim, a known survivor. And the dog that hasn't barked, I mean, clearly Trump knows more than he's letting on. He's not barking. He spent time with one of the victims of Epstein and Ghislaine, and he's not barking, and clearly that's what's happening. However, others believe that this is actually a vindication. They state that Virginia has never come out to state that Trump was an abuser or one of the men that she was trafficked to. And notably, in her recent posthumously published book, she writes relatively kind words towards Trump and meeting him. I mean, she was very vague, but it wasn't over the top, but it wasn't, I guess, bad. To which others argue that, well, she mentions that she was abused by other huge politicians and wealthy businessmen, whom she will not name due to her own safety. This book is published while Trump is the president of the United States. So maybe, yeah, no matter how goofy American politics seems to be, which it is, we're a mess over here, the president of the United States is still one of the highest powers in the world, which leads some to argue that it would make sense that she would not badmouth Trump in her book, accuse him in her book. It's just not going to end up well for her to accuse the sitting president. But others argue, well, she could, because others have done it before. A lot of people have actually accused this specific sitting president of lots of heinous things. So it's just, there's no end to the back and forth. And we've spent hours going in these soon-to-be fistfights in the comment sections, and it's just widely unproductive. Nobody's convincing anyone to come to the other side. So, you know. In another email that is sent to Michael Wolff, keep Michael Wolff in mind for later. He is under a lot of fire. More on him later, but he is a reporter who served as an advisor of sorts for Epstein on how to handle Trump, who was going to run for office at that point. So this is during his first presidential run, which turned out to be successful in terms of he became the president, right? That was when he was first elected as president. This email is from 2015. So he had already announced that he was going to run in 2016. And it reads, "From Wolff to Epstein, I think you should let him hang himself." He's talking about Trump. "If he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, that gives you valuable PR and political currency." So some netizens interpret this as saying, Trump has probably been to the House in the plane, which Epstein might have proof of. But if Trump goes out and says, hey, I haven't been to the House, hey, I haven't been to the plane, then Jeffrey Epstein suddenly has this political currency of like, I can expose you for lying. Other netizens have interpreted this as Trump has not been to the House or the plane. Continuing, Michael Wolff says, you can hang him in a way that potentially generates positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him. So that would mean probably Epstein coming out and saying, Trump has never done anything weird. What do you mean? You could save him, generating a debt, of course. It is possible that when asked, he will say, Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is going to be outlawed in a Trump regime. Do with that what you will. That's in 2016 during Trump's first run for office, in which he was successful. But in a 2019 email before his second run, which was unsuccessful, so January 31st, 2019, this is actually 6 months before Epstein is arrested. Epstein emails Wolf, victim, Mar-a-Lago. So it's like redacted. And it says, Trump said he asked me to resign. Never a member, ever. And I do want to preface, Jeffrey Epstein's grammar, his punctuation, his spelling. If he weren't already dead, I think an English teacher would want to kill him. Never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So some netizens have interpreted this as he knew Ghislaine was what? Recruiting underage employees of Mar-a-Lago to come get trafficked? If that's the case, why didn't he stop it or go to the authorities, considering if anybody had the power at that time to stop Epstein and Ghislaine, it would have been Trump, because of how powerful he is and how wealthy he is. And also, if Ghislaine is a member at Mar-a-Lago, to be the owner of Mar-a-Lago, it's a very different standing. It's a different social standing. But others are saying, well, he asked her to stop, but maybe he didn't know what was going on. And he asked her to stop. So maybe he's a good person. Additionally, the whole back and forth gets trickier when you factor in the birthday cards from Trump to Epstein. And there's going to be a lot more on that later. White House press secretary states that the president did not write the birthday card to Epstein. A lot of people have compared his signature the president's signature is literally everywhere. Every U.S. president's signature is everywhere. They sign everything all the time. A lot of people say it looks the same. But the White House press secretary says he did not sign the letter. And that is basically why the president is going to sue the Wall Street Journal. More on that later. But the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, continues. The unnamed victim. So there was this whole thing. The Democrats, they released these emails, a lot of them. And the one where it says redacted victim and Trump spent hours at Epstein's house together. And so they redacted the victim's name because you want to redact all the victims' names, especially when their association with the president of the United States. You have an entire political party that could go after you if maybe they don't like that email. So I can see why they redacted it. However, I guess if you look at the other side of the aisle, they are arguing, why the did you redact it? So let me just tell you what the White House press secretary said. She says the unnamed victim referenced in those emails is the late Virginia Giuffre, who repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in any wrongdoing whatsoever and couldn't have been friendlier to her in their limited interactions. The fact remains that President Trump kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club decades ago for being a creep to his female employees, including Giuffre. One netizen thing that people have pointed out about this statement is it sounds wishy-washy, and second of all, she keeps pronouncing Giuffre as Guffrey. But then there is an email from Epstein to Michael Wolff that just reads, of course Trump knew about the girls. If this part on Trump in this episode feels a bit thin, it's because the next part of this two-part series is going to dive deeper into a lot of the major names. So Trump, Clinton, Gates, conspiracies that Epstein and Ghislaine were political spies. This is just the starting point of the conversation of how Trump and Epstein and how it relates to Virginia Giuffre. There's going to be a lot more that is going to lead to the memes of Donald Trump and Bill Clinton having a salacious alleged affair that has now become a meme, with people memeing Big Beautiful Bill and people calling POTUS Throatus. So there's that, and there's going to be more on that later. But so far, that is what Virginia Giuffre writes in her book about Trump, because I do see a lot of people referencing the statement, and I read through the whole book just to see if am I missing anything, but that does seem to be what she wrote about him. Now, the next person under fire is a billionaire couple. Virginia writes in her book, there are other men whom I was trafficked to who have threatened me by asserting that they will use litigation to bankrupt me. One of these men's names has come up repeatedly in various court filings, and in response, he has told my lawyers that if I talk about him publicly, he will employ his vast resources to keep me in court for the rest of my life. So for that reason, the next person, Virginia Giuffre, only refers to this man as billionaire man number one and his pregnant wife. However, in her 2016 deposition, Virginia Giuffre sues Ghislaine Maxwell. And this is we're going to get into it in the next part, but Virginia Giuffre publicly accuses Epstein and Ghislaine.
She is a monster. She's worse than Epstein.
Ghislaine comes out and basically says Virginia Giuffre is a liar. So Virginia Giuffre's attorneys decide, we're going to sue you for defamation.
Oh.
They sue Ghislaine Maxwell for defamation, and that kickstarts a series of events which leads to both of them being deposed. in a deposition where they're essentially being questioned by the opposition's attorneys. And these deposition, the transcripts were unsealed. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot of names in there. However, in that 2016 deposition where she is deposed and Ghislaine Maxwell's attorneys are grilling her, Virginia does name people by name, whereas in her book, she does not. There are still some redactions in the deposition before it was released, but a lot of people have been cross-referencing the deposition and the book and trying to figure out who is who.
So we know?
I don't know anything. People think they know. Some netizens think that billionaire man number one and his pregnant wife is Glenn Dubin and his wife, Dr. Eva Dubin. She states specifically in her deposition, Virginia does, well, it was in the beginning, like after my training, Glenn Dubin and Redacted were the first two people I was sent out to. She states that she cannot give exact dates and how old she was, but she says, I can't tell you piece by piece who, but I knew Glenn Dubin was first. Later on page 199 of the deposition, Virginia is asked by Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, so you're saying Ghislaine Maxwell directed you to have sex with Glenn Dubin? Correct. What words did Ghislaine Maxwell tell you to go have sex with Glenn Dubin? It was same. It was like the same all the time, all right? They want me to go provide these men with a massage. And when they say massage, that means erotic, okay? That's their term for it. I think there are plenty of other witnesses that can attest to what massage actually means. And I'm telling you that Ghislaine told me to go to Glenn Dubin and give him a massage, which means sex. We have no clue if Glenn Dubin is billionaire man number one. We have no clue if he was an abuser, but it's been widely talked about in the news that he has some sort of connection to Epstein, and this some sort of connection is actually a pretty strong connection. Whether that be sinister or not, it's a pretty strong connection. Virginia explains that this was a marked change in her victimization from Epstein and Ghislaine. She states that she went from being assaulted by just them two to now Epstein is trying to manipulate her, and he's getting her to believe that the next step in her actually training to become a massage therapist is to go work on Epstein's rich friends, be their massage therapist. Especially when Epstein allegedly tells her that the very first client is going to be a couple, I think that she probably is more inclined to believe him. It's going to be a man and his pregnant wife. So that would appear like a real appropriate, legitimate massage. They're staying at the Breakers, which is an exclusive Palm Beach hotel nearby where they have private residences. Epstein was very firm on the rules. Be gentle with her, talking about the pregnant wife. Make her feel comfortable, but save most of your energy for him. Which would still sound somewhat appropriate, considering perhaps he's a bigger man. Virginia would need to physically exert herself massaging him. Then Epstein tells her, give him whatever he wants, just like you do for me. That night, she goes to the residential area of the Breakers property. First, she goes into the bedroom to massage the pregnant woman. She doesn't really know how to give a prenatal massage. In fact, Ghislaine kept freaking her out by saying if you massage a pregnant woman's ankles, they can go into early labor and the baby could die. So she's barely even touching this woman. She's terrified of harming the child. Within 45 minutes, this billionaire wife tells her that she's going to go to sleep. Virginia quietly turns off the light, leaves, and out in the living room, who she refers to as billionaire number one, has thrown a rug on the floor and he's laying there, face on the floor, naked, and he's facing up actually. So Virginia starts massaging him, and it's been like 4 hours since she got here at this point. And she is believing that maybe this is a normal massage because it's been 4 hours until billionaire number one tells her to take off her clothes. She states bluntly in her book, I was disappointed but not surprised. We had sex on the floor, and afterward he tipped me $100. As I left that night, I felt that familiar, scooped out, empty feeling. When she gets back to Epstein's house, she states that he asks her how it went with a casualness that should be alarming. Quote, I told him I had done everything that anyone required of me and that his friend seemed satisfied. He grinned, then popped a red grape in his mouth and walked back to his office. I had pleased him and I was dismissed. So why do people think that this is Glenn Dubin? Okay, it's just a guessing game at this point, okay? I guess some of that could come down to Glenn Dubin is a billionaire. He is a billionaire hedge fund manager. And to make the conspiracies a bit more intense, his wife, Dr. Eva Anderson Dubin, was Miss Sweden and apparently dated Epstein for years before she married Dubin in 1994. They've also reportedly invited him over for Thanksgiving dinner at their Palm Beach home after his 2008 conviction. So this is after they publicly know what he's done. It's also rumored that Epstein is the godfather to their children. Some people go even further to think, there's some crazy conspiracies that Epstein is an Israeli spy. We're going to get into it in the next part. But Glenn Dubin's wife even wrote an email to Epstein's probation officer stating that she feels 100% comfortable with Epstein around her minor children. So there's that. Eva Dubin also testified during Ghislaine's sex trafficking trial and stated that she did not witness any inappropriateness or any strange conduct between Epstein and any teenage girls. I will say that aside from the first child of the Dubin family, the birth dates of the other two children, I couldn't find super reliably published birth years, but it seems to be, the timelines could make sense that Eva was pregnant during that time. And I say that as in, I believe that this happened to Virginia. I don't have a clue if it's Glenn Dubin and his wife Eva. Although I think that they are incredibly shady, but that's just a personal opinion. They've also donated $27,000 to Andrew Cuomo's mayoral run in New York City recently, which was goofy to say the least. And based off recent files being released, it is believed by netizens that in 2017, so 2 years before Epstein is arrested, the second time, 2 years before Epstein is found dead, he claims to somebody through his email that he spent Thanksgiving in 2017 with Trump and Eva Dubin and Glenn Dubin. The same email chain contains Trump, Eva, and Glenn. So that could mean he spent Thanksgiving with Glenn Dubin and Eva Dubin as well as Donald Trump. It could mean that he didn't. It could mean nothing. If you're interested in more about the Dubin family, I would point you to a testimony from Glenn Dubin's former butler who alleges that they saw a 15-year-old girl distraught in the Dubin family home before, and that there was it was bad, they allege. They allege it was bad.
What is that?
Like, she's told them allegedly that she is Epstein's personal assistant, and they were confused because they're like, you look like a child. How can you be a personal assistant for an adult? This doesn't make any sense. And there was just some weird energy. And they said, I mean, the Dubins have like 55 million homes. That's not true. That's an exaggeration. Did you know one time I got a letter because I said someone was a billionaire, and then they sent me a letter and they were like, I'm not a billionaire, by the way. I was like, okay. So they do not have 55 million homes. They have multiple homes. And I think she gets sent off to be a nanny at another home. But then the Dubin live-in nanny was like, oh, I've never seen her before. So there's a lot being disputed. But I will say that that testimony is, if you believe it, very alarming. Very alarming. But I would just warn you, be very careful, because these are all very, very powerful people. Then there's the issue with Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz is a Harvard professor, a criminal defense attorney for Epstein for a period of time. You may not know Alan Dershowitz. You may know Alan Dershowitz. And chances are, if it's the latter, you know him as Alan, I kept my underwear on, Dershowitz. Or maybe not. Okay, that's very niche. Maybe you know him as part of O.J. Simpson's Dream Team. And he also represented Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein. And he was on Trump's defense team in his first impeachment trial in 2020. Notably, Alan Dershowitz was Epstein's attorney while they negotiated his non-prosecution agreement in Florida in 2007. Dershowitz has stated that this is the one case that he regrets taking, the Epstein case. He has been named in Virginia's deposition, where she states in 2016. And I know Stephen Kaufman was one of the first I was sent to. So Stephen Kaufman is another name, but there's not as much on Stephen Kaufman as of right now. Continuing, she says, Alan Dershowitz could have been between Glenn Dubin and Stephen. The first time I was with Alan Dershowitz was in New York. So I wasn't actually sent to him. It actually happened at one of Jeffrey's residences. What did he do to deserve such a precise nickname, though? Alan, I kept my underwear on Dershowitz? Well, apparently, after being initially accused by Virginia as being someone she was trafficked to, he states that he did get a massage at Epstein's. But, it was given by a 50-year-old Russian woman named Olga, and, quote, I kept my underwear on.
I kept my underwear on during the massage. I don't like massages particularly.
Thus, Alan, I kept my underwear on, Dershowitz. He's just also an overall asshole, which is not a crime. It's just an opinion. He would get hate comments where people would write to him, you are the demon of evil. You are the best argument for abortion one could present. He would apparently happily tape them to his door. To call him a fucking annoying contrarian would probably be one of the nicest things ever uttered about Alan Dershowitz. He's quoted in an op-ed saying, there must be criminal sanctions against sex with very young children. But it is doubtful whether such sanctions should apply to teenagers above the age of puberty, since voluntary sex is so common in their age group. He believed that no matter how old the partner is, 15 should be the reasonable age of consent. He also hates when men are prosecuted for hiring sex workers. He wrote once, "These men who occasionally seek to taste the forbidden fruit of sex for hire should not be arrested." According to someone in one of Dershowitz's lectures, they claim Dershowitz had this idea of sex workers, they know what they're doing. They need to be prosecuted. But you can't ruin a John's life over wanting to take a bite of forbidden fruit here and there. Another Dershowitz original quote is, "Radical feminists can accuse all men of being and radical African Americans can accuse all whites of being racist without fear of discipline or rebuke." However, in 2019, Virginia sues Dershowitz for defamation in the same way that she sued Ghislaine Maxwell. He countersues and they both settle. Later in Virginia's book, she states that in 2022, the two of them, Virginia and Alan Dershowitz, settle out of court with no payments made by either party to the other, and the agreement seemingly being that both of them would release a joint pre-approved by both sides statement. Virginia's statement reads, "I've long believed that I was trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein to Alan Dershowitz. However, I was very young at the time. It was a very stressful and traumatic environment. And Mr. Dershowitz has, from the beginning, consistently denied these allegations. I now recognize I may have made a mistake in identifying Mr. Dershowitz." Alan Dershowitz's statement reads in short, "She had come to believe that at the time she accused me, she believed what she said. She has suffered much at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, and I commend her work combating the evil of sex trafficking." But a year before Epstein was arrested, it seemed that Dershowitz was not friendly with Epstein anymore. In the recent email dump, another person is mocking Dershowitz for being like the Kim Kardashian of the legal scene, famous for being famous. Epstein responds, "Nicely put!" exclamation point. Take that as you will. Alan Dershowitz says that Epstein wasn't a pedophile also.
There was no allegation even that Epstein was a pedophile.
And not to put words in his mouth, but basically he's saying that that term is for actually people who like prepubescent children. And I think that is always
What's
the
going
crazy...
on with, yeah, this guy is like literally outing himself.
Yeah, and Megyn Kelly said the same thing. Yeah.
What?
She was like, Epstein is sick and nasty, but he's not a pedophile because legally, I don't know why people are obsessed with the definition.
Yeah.
A minor is a minor. I'm so confused. Let's talk about vice presidents. Al Gore served as the vice president under Bill Clinton. Virginia states in her book that Epstein had hosted Al and his wife, then wife, they are now divorced, I believe, Tipper Gore over for dinner, and that she was there. But if you go to her deposition from 2016, she's asked, "Tell me about the circumstances of meeting Al Gore." And she says, it's a little bit hazy at where that took place. I mean, we were going back a long time ago, but I do remember one thing about him. I believed he was a wonderful guy who loved his wife, and they spent the entire time like there was nothing else around them. It was just those two. It was a dinner table, a long dinner table with people around. They were just lovely. Just watching them as a couple, I remember thinking, you know, he's somebody that I would definitely vote for. He's just somebody that loves his wife that much. A lot of netizens comment, I sort of suspect Al Gore and his then wife Tipper Gore are the kinds of people who would get invited to the private island by a social climber like Epstein, but not the kind of people who moved in the same social circles as Epstein. Like, they don't strike me as the kind of people who would be friends with Epstein's friends. With another netizen writing, Epstein was probably selective with who he showed what sides of the island, if that makes sense. Because you do have to remember that Epstein was a social climber, but it is likely that a lot of high-profile, powerful men liked what Epstein was doing in his private life. But he could probably scope out which ones did and which ones didn't. And so a lot of people are saying, yeah, okay, maybe Al Gore was at the island, but we don't think that he was doing crazy stuff. And Virginia says that he was nothing but nice and loved his wife. However, in 2010, Al Gore is accused of making unwanted advances to a masseuse at a Portland hotel in 2006, which he was cleared of by the DA. The DA said no. Al Gore has also passionately denied any of these allegations, but netizens believe, if true, sounds straight out of Epstein's playbook. I don't know. Take it as you will, okay? Everybody's got a different opinion. Virginia also states in her deposition, they, Epstein and Ghislaine, instructed me to go to George Mitchell. George Mitchell may or may not sound familiar. He is a former U.S. Senator for the state of Maine. He was a former Senate Majority Leader. He was a special envoy for then President Bill Clinton, and then later a special envoy for the Middle East peace for then President Barack Obama. He's also 92 freaking years old right now. So I don't blame you if you don't know this man, but he also wrote a heartfelt, meaningful message for Epstein in what is now dubbed the birthday book.
What?
It reads in short, Dear Jeffrey, the beginning of the new year is an appropriate time to count our blessings. Among mine is your friendship. It's been more than a decade since we met by chance at an airport in Washington. During that time, you've been a good friend. I'm grateful for that and for what I hope will be many more years of your friendship. Among your blessings has been the opportunity to lead a full, exciting, and fantastically varied life. Now that you've reached a critical milestone, I hope you will intensify your activities in the widest possible range of issues, especially in the field of science, where you've already done so much. With my congratulations, gratitude, and best wishes, George Mitchell. George Mitchell states that he never victimized Virginia, stating, the allegation contained in the release documents is false. I've never met, spoken with, or had contact with the alleged victim. A spokesperson later states, during the time he knew Epstein, he had no knowledge of Epstein's actions involving underage girls, stating that once he did, he, quote, he never had any contact with Mr. Epstein again. Virginia states in the deposition that, quote, they instructed me to go to George Mitchell, Jean-Luc Brunel, which, again, we've talked about him in previous episodes. He's a huge figure in the Epstein case. He's dead now, thank God, but please refer to those episodes. We're going to cover him briefly in the next part as well. But she states that she was sent to George Mitchell, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Bill Richardson. Bill Richardson being the former governor of New Mexico and the former U.S. ambassador for the UN and energy secretary during the Clinton administration. One of Epstein's biggest properties, Zorro Ranch, was in New Mexico. Later on page 200 of the deposition, Ghislaine's attorney asks Virginia, Ghislaine Maxwell told you to go give a massage to Bill Richardson, correct? Correct. When did Ghislaine Maxwell tell you to go give a massage to Bill Richardson? I don't know dates. When Ghislaine Maxwell used the words, go give a massage to Bill Richardson, where were you? Virginia's like, I can't tell you where we were. I know that I was sent to, I don't know where we were when she told me to do that. Because again, it's like, I mean, she was going everywhere with them. Where she was, she doesn't know. Where were you sent to? New Mexico. Bill Richardson's spokesperson has stated, these allegations and inferences are completely false. To be clear, in Governor Richardson's limited interactions with Mr. Epstein, he never saw him in the presence of young or underage girls. Governor Richardson has never met Ms. Giuffre, and that is not the only governor with ties to Epstein. It's actually far from the only governor. Thomas Pritzker is part of a very wealthy family. He's not a governor, but his cousin is. The current Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, who has been associated with Epstein, he vehemently denies the association. I do think that Governor J.B. Pritzker's association with Epstein is, I couldn't find a lot on it. So he's like, I've never had contact with Epstein. As for my cousin Thomas, I barely talked to that guy. Thomas Pritzker is not the governor, but he is the executive chairman of Hyatt Hotels.
Wow.
Some people believe, with no proof or evidence, because we weren't in the room, we don't know anything, some people believe that he is billionaire number 2 in Virginia's book, though there is no proof of that. She says about billionaire number 2, again, this is no proof that this is the chairman of Hyatt Hotels, or Thomas Pritzker or anyone, but she writes in her book, Epstein made it clear that he wanted me to give this 50-year-old stranger with thinning brown hair a massage, so when we arrived, I accompanied this man to his cottage. He does appear to have some thinning brown hair, but again, that is not proof. There's not even association, but just saying. She states that she tried her absolute best to put on her most professional sounding voice because she thought that he would get the message. Again, this is not about Thomas Pritzker, this is about billionaire number 2. He did not, and at the end, he offered to pay her triple what Epstein was paying her if she came to work for him. She was terrified, she politely declined, and then told Epstein about it because remember, Epstein has a picture of her brother. Virginia states in her deposition, they instructed me to go to George Mitchell, Jean-Luc Brunel, Bill Richardson, the governor, another prince, I don't know a name, a guy that owns a hotel, a really large hotel chain. I can't remember which hotel it was. So that's where people are speculating that it's Thomas Pritzker and that he might be unnamed in the book because perhaps she found out how powerful this man is, or maybe she doesn't know his name. Again, there's no proof that it's Thomas Pritzker, but in the recent email releases, Epstein does refer to him as, quote, like family. Does not suggest any wrongdoing. They also had cordial emails sent back and forth. So netizens have been putting together all the clues online. And again, whether we're right or not is to be determined, hopefully, when the documents are released. But Virginia describes in her book that she was, quote, lent out to a psychology professor whose research was, Epstein was funding his research. The professor ends up on Epstein's island. She describes him as a quirky little man with a balding pate, white hair, crazy mad scientist look. It seemed he wasn't used to being with women. Epstein instructs Virginia to keep him happy. Eventually, the professor, they spend like all day doing water sports and all these other activities. And then finally he's like, hey, can I get one of those famous massages that Epstein has told me so much about? And she knows exactly what that means. She takes him to a cabana and gives him a, quote, rub down that ends in intercourse. And she says, the psychologist was only the first of many academics from prestigious universities who I was forced to service sexually. The fallout in academia has been massive. Again, if you refer to our previous episodes, Epstein really liked to believe himself an intellectual, and he would use his corruptly gained funds to then fund these research projects and centers at prestigious universities. People said that Epstein was a collector of crimes, minors, but also of scientists. It gave him a kick to associate and be around these very objectively intelligent people, and he was heavily associated with Harvard University, MIT, and Brown University, which led in a massive fallout of even the presidents of these universities having to resign. Or some of them, Larry Summers recently went viral because he was the former Harvard president. He's an economics professor. The emails get dumped. He's got emails. I'm going to go into this later, but he has a wife at the time. He's got emails with Epstein where he's like, I'm trying to zhuzh up this girl that I'm trying to date and I need advice. And Epstein is giving him, yeah.
Wow.
So then he goes into his classroom the next day filled with Harvard students and he's like, hey, so I'm here to teach. I'm not here to talk about the emails.
Oh, after this has been exposed.
Yeah. And then he, I believe he resigned, so.
Some of you will have seen my statement of regret, expressing my shame with respect to what I did in communication with Mr. Epstein, and that I've said that I'm going to step back from public activities, but for a time, but that I think it's very important to fulfill my teaching obligations. And so, with your permission, we're going to go forward and talk about the material in the class.
Wow.
So Larry Summers is one, but this is not Larry Summers because this is a psychology professor. If you've been following for a while, you know that our first launch with Shopify was Grandpa Mango's art studio, where we sold these limited edition prints and original pieces hand painted by my husband's grandpa, and that was his life's dream. And so that was our very first experience with Shopify. And now we have something else in the works with Shopify. Don't get the wrong idea. I could not have started that small business for Grandpa Mango without Shopify, the world's leading e-commerce site. Shopify's point of sale system is a unified command center for your business, and it brings together in-store and online operations. Plus, with Shopify, you can keep people coming back with personalized experiences and first-party data that gives marketing teams a competitive edge. Basically, you'll know what your customers like and want before they even tell you. If you're waiting for a sign to begin your small business, this is it. Stop overthinking and start selling with Shopify. Turn those what ifs into why nots and keep giving those big dreams the best shot with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/rotten. Go to shopify.com/rotten. Shopify.com/rotten. Netizens found Virginia's first original manuscript for her memoir, so that was a whole thing. She had another manuscript for a memoir, but she was misguided by a journalist who told her if you fictionalize a lot of things, then you can't be sued, because you could argue it's a work of fiction. So then she kind of fictionalized a few things in the manuscript. It was never published, but a lot of attorneys that are against victims, they've been using it as like, well, you lied in that. How do we know you didn't lie in everything else? God forbid anyone write a novel once in a while. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But in that manuscript, she does name him as Stephen. And so with that, netizens put together that it may or may not be Steven Pinker. She says Stephen was a quirky little man with white hair and a mad scientist look about him. Steven Pinker is also a Harvard professor like Larry Summers. And he is someone who had previously rallied against cancel culture. And then he started blocking anyone who mentions Epstein in his mentions. So, okay.
Wow.
He says that he has no association with Epstein other than, quote, other than third parties who have invited us to some of the same events. He also states, that is not me. I've never set foot on Epstein's island nor any of his other residences. This is not to say that Giuffre's accusations are true, just that they are not about me. We don't know if Steven Pinker is associated with Epstein in any sort of sinister way, and there is no proof that he is the psychology professor described in Virginia's book, but that's just the discourse. Then we have Marvin Minsky. He is a prominent MIT cognitive and computer scientist. He helped co-found the AI division, like the AI Research Center at MIT. He's also dead. He died in 2016. Yeah, Virginia states in her 2016 deposition, they instructed me to go to George Mitchell, John Luke Brunel, Bill Richardson, another prince, I don't know his name, a guy that owns a hotel, a really large hotel chain, I can't remember which hotel it was, and Marvin Minsky. There was just a whole bunch of them that it's just hard for me to remember all of them, you know? I was told to do something by these people constantly, my whole life revolved around just pleasing these men and keeping Ghislaine and Jeffrey happy, and their whole entire lives revolved around sex. They call massages sex, they call modeling sex. Virginia's asked, where did you go to have sex with Marvin Minsky? I believe it was the U.S. Virgin Island, Jeffrey Epstein's island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Epstein Island, which Virginia's attorneys later checked records. And in 2002, while Virginia is being trafficked by Epstein, sure enough, Epstein and Minsky hosted a gathering with prominent figures in AI on the island. That's not to say definitively that that is evidence that she was trafficked to Minsky, but there is a connection there. Virginia states transparently, this could have been when I was trafficked to him for the first time. I'm not sure of the date. What I do know is that Minsky was in his 70s then, precisely 56 years older than me. We shared a birthday, and I remember what happened.
Wow.
She alleges in her book that she was sent into one of the cabanas, and she will never forget Minsky's bald head and just trying to focus on the waves outside, the sound of the waves, as she was forced to. Later in the book, she details how when she first went public with accusations against Marvin Minsky, a colleague of Minsky's at MIT, Richard Stallman, sent out an email blast suggesting that Virginia was a willing participant in the cabana. According to Virginia, he wrote, quote, we can imagine many scenarios, but the most plausible scenario is that she presented herself to him as entirely willing. But according to NPR, this is also the type of guy that writes, I'm skeptical of the claim that voluntary pedophilia harms children. The argument that it causes harm seems to be based on cases which aren't voluntary, which are then stretched by parents who are horrified that their little baby is maturing. He later takes it back and says that he spoke with victims and he changed his mind about it, which I didn't know that you had to personally talk to victims to see why this take should put someone in prison, but okay. He had to resign after that. But it was not just MIT under fire. Like I said, it was Brown University. It was Harvard University. And it's also the Billionaire's Dinner host, John Brockman. John Brockman owned one of the most powerful literary agencies in the world of academia. He is the one that's publishing all of these books from these scientists and these think tanks, and he would host this billionaire's dinner annually at the annual TED Talk conference in Monterey. Yeah. Virginia describes in her memoir that at one point she flew from Epstein's property in Zorro Ranch to Northern California near San Francisco, where Epstein had all these meetings, and they were in town for the billionaire's dinner hosted by John Brockman, which also the TED conference is there. And Virginia describes Brockman as being a fixer for Epstein. So he would connect Epstein to scientists who were doing research that Epstein was interested in funding. And again, a lot of people are like, okay, this is where a lot of conspiracies come in. Some people are saying, hey, he was a narcissist. He was this kid from Brooklyn who was obsessed with the ultra elite. He wanted to be the smartest guy in the room. So he surrounds himself with all of these scientists so that he could present himself as one of them. And then there are others that are like, or he's an Israeli spy that's also funding all of these major things. There's like a lot of conspiracies. It really depends on the rabbit hole that you want to go down. And I think also conspiracies are one of those things where it really depends on the day that you're reading them. Some days you feel a little more conspiratorial. Some days you don't. So I guess that's up for everyone to decide which rabbit hole they want to go down. But Virginia states in her book, in due time, Epstein would force me to have sex with at least 2 other people in Brockman's circle. This does not implicate John Brockman directly. He might truly have no idea what Epstein was doing, but he's also connected to Marvin Minsky, Steven Pinker. I mean, they are all academics, so that could be why, but there could be something else. I will say it's very interesting that he's been pretty quiet. He has not really said much, but again, this is not to say that he is definitively connected to any wrongdoing at all. I'm just saying it's a name that comes up. But one of the most terrifying people listed in Virginia's book is a former prime minister of a nation. In Virginia's deposition, she is asked, if you're confused by a question, you need to let me know so I can clarify the question, okay? Okay. For example, if I asked you the question, were you sexually trafficked to a foreign president? Do you understand what that question means? Yes. What does it mean? Was I lent out for the purposes of sex to a foreign president? All right, what is the answer to that question? Yes. Virginia describes this man in legal documents as, quote, a well-known prime minister. She says, this was the most violent man that she has ever witnessed. Quote, he wanted violence. She describes as how he would choke her until she loses consciousness, only to bring her back and do it all over again. It's like he took pleasure in her fear for her life, in her begging for her life. She says, horrifically, the prime minister laughed when he hurt me and got more aroused when I begged him to stop. I emerged from the cabana bleeding from my mouth and down there. She says, for days, it hurt to breathe and to swallow. She said it was the most terrifying experience of her life, that she got on her knees afterwards and begged Epstein to promise her to never send her back to the prime minister ever again. She doesn't know if Epstein owed this man or was in fear for this man or what, but instead of promising to never traumatize her like that ever again, he just coldly says, yeah, you'll get that sometimes, referring to the violence of the prime minister. Virginia writes, Epstein cared only about Epstein. She says the prime minister's assault was so bad that, quote, at that point, I hit bottom. I now knew I wouldn't survive. I saw only 2 possible options. Either someone Epstein trafficked me to would kill me, or I would self-exit. She details the second time that she's sent to service the prime minister on Epstein's private jet. She says she was in fear for her life, but maybe it's the lack of privacy on a private jet. Thankfully, he did not enact physical violence in the form of choking and causing her to bleed all over like the first assault, but this was just a regular assault. Virginia says, I didn't know it then, but my second interaction with the prime minister was the beginning of the end for me. In the book, the prime minister is unnamed, but it's not because Virginia does not know this man's name. She says, while we need to be brave about naming our abusers, we must also protect ourselves. There are certain men who I fear naming. She says, for the prime minister, I know his name, and he knows what he did to me. Even though when others have sought comment from him about my allegations, he has denied them. I fear that this man will seek to hurt me if I say his name here. There are 2 guesses online about who this former prime minister could be. The most common conspiracies and thoughts come down to 2, with some saying that it could be the former prime minister of the United Kingdom, Tony Blair, with some netizens pointing out how odd it is that Tony Blair was invited to the White House shortly before Virginia's memoir was released. According to some reports, Tony Blair and Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein were buds. They all knew each other, and the Daily Mail in Australia has reportedly stated, whether this is accurate or inaccurate is up for debate, that the prime minister in the book is a British ex-prime minister. But a lot of netizens actually don't think that the prime minister in question is Tony Blair. Not that Tony Blair is off the hook in the eyes of netizens. A lot of netizens don't like Tony Blair, but they think specifically that this prime minister is the former prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. According to the Times of Israel, Ehud Barak had visited Epstein 30 times in 2013 to 2017. Which is not the same timeline as when Virginia was being trafficked, obviously, but the netizen speculations being that those are just the years that are tracked and or released. He could have been friendly with him for a very long time. In fact, Barak himself states that he had met Epstein in the early 2000s. But of course, he denies any sort of wrongdoing, stating that, yes, he had gone to Epstein's house a few times. Quote, I came to his house quite a few times with my wife. However, there are pictures, right? There are pictures of who it appears to be Ehud Barak entering Jeffrey's Manhattan townhouse. And a lot of young women also entering allegedly around that same time frame. Could be his wife's friends, could be not. But furthermore, his spokesperson did state that, yes, he had attended several small functions in Mr. Epstein's home in New York. But if the Times of Israel is to be believed, 30 times in the span of a few years is hardly several. It sounds like a lot. He's also quite friendly with Colombia's Andre Pastrana, and Virginia reports in her deposition that she met another huge politician, a leader of a foreign country that had a Spanish accent. So people think that that could be Andre Pastrana, but that has not been proven at all. None of this has been proven in the court of law, and that is not to say that any of this is not true or that Virginia is not to be believed. I mean, I don't think that there's really anyone who doesn't believe Virginia, but I think it's, you see what's going on with the Epstein files, of course, right? But some argue that the timeline with the ex-British Prime Minister Tony Blair makes more sense. However, it's just more people seem to be theorizing that it's the former Israeli Prime Minister, with one netizen commenting, no wonder the US government doesn't want to release anything. It would paint a very bad picture on their bestie nation. But none has painted a worse picture, aside from the US, than what is being done in the United Kingdom. At one point, Prince Andrew was known as the playboy of the royal family. He is divorced from his wife, Sarah Ferguson, and according to some reports, after he divorced his wife, he started having an on and off relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell.
What?
The first real mention of Prince Andrew comes in on page 86 of Virginia's memoir. She talks about how Ghislaine had left for a while to meet up with her old friend, Prince Andrew, who was going to go to the Heidi Klum annual Halloween party. And again, Heidi Klum's name does come up, but it doesn't seem like she has any strong association. I will say that her annual Halloween party, everyone's invited. I mean, I've never been invited, but it seems like a lot of people are invited, if that makes sense. It doesn't seem like hey, this is a very intimate gathering of people that I vetted and I love to hang out with. And Prince Andrew was going to be there. Ghislaine was going to be there, along with Donald and Melania Trump. This is in like the early 2000s, before they ever became residents of the White House. But that is not when Virginia meets him. Virginia meets Prince Andrew in London in March 10th of 2001. And that day is already starting off very different for Virginia. Ghislaine is in a particularly good mood, perhaps too good. She wakes Virginia up in a sing-songy voice. Get out of bed, sleepyhead. Ghislaine tells her that just like Cinderella, she's going to be lucky enough to meet a handsome prince. Prince Andrew is going to be in town, so hurry up and get ready. So the whole day they go out shopping. Ghislaine is pulling all the stops, purchasing a Burberry bag for Virginia, 3 separate outfits. 2 of them are Ghislaine's picks, very sexy, sophisticated dresses. The third option was Virginia. She said, I just wanted to look like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera because those were my idols, because she's like 17 at this point. And she chose a crop t-shirt and a sparkly jeans. She begs Ghislaine to wear that outfit. It's a whole ordeal. Virginia convinces her, and nothing is going to ruin the moment for Ghislaine because Prince Andrew walks in through the townhouse doors in London, and Ghislaine, according to Virginia, is acting even more playful and flirtatious, like a little flirt. You know, that's kind of how she describes her, very coquettish, like cheeky, and immediately she wants to play one of her favorite games, which is basically guess the age of the child. Guess Virginia's age, come on. Prince Andrew, according to Virginia, guesses correctly, 17 years old. Everyone's impressed, and a sick response, Prince Andrew allegedly tells Virginia it's because his daughters are just a little younger, so he's really good at guessing ages. Ghislaine, however, has another joke. I guess we'll have to trade her in soon.
Wow.
That night, Virginia follows Epstein and Ghislaine's lead, calling Prince Andrew Andy. And then Virginia has this moment where she realizes that as weird as all of this is Prince Andrew. She writes in her book, I suddenly thought of something. My mom would never forgive me if I met someone as famous as Prince Andrew and didn't pose for a picture. She grabs her disposable camera. Epstein takes the photo for her. It's the prince with his arm around her waist and Ghislaine behind them. And a lot of people say she smiles like a Cheshire cat. And most notably in the picture, Virginia looks very young. She looks like a teenager. This photo would go on to haunt the royal family for decades, and it probably will until the end of time.
But
Yes.
at the same time, that photo almost changed everything too.
Yeah.
That decision changed everything.
Because even with that photo, Prince Andrew said, well, I don't remember taking that photo, so that photo could be fake for all I know. If she didn't even have this photo, I don't know what he would have said. I don't know what kind of things he would have tried to do. After small talk, they decide Epstein, Ghislaine, and Virginia are going to get in one car. Prince Andrew and his security detail are going to get in another car. They're going to go out to eat at a restaurant and immediately go to a London nightclub called Tramp. Virginia remembers the prince getting her a cocktail and dancing, and he's just so sweaty on the dance floor. Which, side note, this is not unbelievable information. A lot of reporters and journalists and a lot of tabloids that have followed Prince Andrew through the years, because he was he's just always been a very problematic royal. He's always been a very big partier, a club goer. A lot of people say that he really gets in on the dance floor. He'd just be dancing on the dance floor. So this is not, oh my gosh, unbelievable. We can never imagine a royal would do this. He did that a lot. Then as they head back to Ghislaine's townhouse, because Prince Andrew is in a separate car, Virginia states that Ghislaine tells her, when we get home, you are to do for him what you do for Jeffrey. Virginia writes in her book, again, her sections on Prince Andrew are very detailed and thorough. This is just a brief synopsis, but she says, back at the house, Maxwell and Epstein said goodnight, headed upstairs, signaling it was time that I take care of the prince. In the years since, I've thought a lot about how he behaved. He was friendly enough, but still entitled, as if he believed having sex with me was his birthright. She explains that she first drew him a bath. He gets in the tub, but he seems pretty eager to get to the bedroom, so that was quick, and he starts licking Virginia's feet, caressing her toes, and she says it was a first for me, and it tickled. Then he was rushing to get to the final part, and, quote, afterward, he said thank you in his clipped British accent. In my memory, the whole thing lasted less than half an hour. She remembers the next morning Ghislaine praising her. You did well. The prince had fun. But she did not know that picture from that night, she said, quote, I had no idea what a commotion this photo would later cause. We're not done, though. A month later, Prince Andrew reunites with this trafficking duo, Epstein and Ghislaine. This time, he goes to New York City. There's another party present, Johanna, another one of Epstein's victims. Ghislaine this time gives the prince a puppet that says it's Prince Andrew, and they take a picture on the couch. It's a puppet holding one of Virginia's breasts, and Johanna sitting on the prince's lap, and the prince with his hand, his actual hand, on Johanna's chest. And Virginia says the symbolism was impossible to ignore. Johanna and I were Ghislaine and Epstein's puppets, and they were pulling the strings. And later, they sent me to a bedroom where I had sex with the prince for a second time. The third time that she's with Prince Andrew, she doesn't recall the exact date, but she says that it was on Epstein's island, and it was an orgy. Virginia says, I was around 18, Epstein, Andy, and approximately 8 other young girls, and I had sex together. The other girls all seemed and appeared to be under the age of 18 and didn't really speak English. Epstein laughed about how they couldn't really communicate, saying they are the easiest girls to get along with. Virginia doesn't distinctively remember if she was 17 or 18 at the time. During Virginia's deposition, she's asked by Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, to whom did Ghislaine Maxwell actually traffic you? You have to understand that Jeffrey and Ghislaine are joined by hip, okay? So they both trafficked me. Ghislaine brought me in for the purpose of being trafficked. Jeffrey was just as part of it as she was. She was just as part of it as he was. They trafficked me to many people, and to be honest, there's people I could name, and then there's people that are just a blur. There was so much happening. Okay, please name a person that Ghislaine Maxwell directed you to go have sex with. Prince Andrew. Later, Prince Andrew goes to state to the BBC in 2019, I don't remember meeting her at all. I don't remember that photograph ever being taken. You can't prove whether or not that photograph is faked or not.
I don't recollect that photograph ever being taken.
Epstein later, in a third-party email, he's not talking to the prince, he's talking to a third party. Yes, Virginia was on my plane, and yes, she had her picture taken with Andrew, as many of my employees have. Further cementing the thought that nobody had, that the photo is doctored. It's not doctored. He also states to the BBC, Prince Andrew does, that it couldn't have been him. Because first of all, he can't sweat.
It was almost impossible for me to sweat.
What do you mean it can't be him? What cannot be him? This whole story cannot be him?
Yes, because he had, when he was in a war, like he was in the military, he had so much adrenaline rushing through him that he could not, he developed a condition where he could not perspirate, he could not sweat, which his medical records do show that he did have that condition, but it's very temporary. And a lot of other reporters have stated that they have seen him as they paparazzi him coming out of places, out of functions, heavily sweating. He also states that he took his daughters to go eat pizza that day, so couldn't have been him. And so with that, a lot of people are very curious to see if the Epstein files are dropped this year, what's going to come out about Prince Andrew. Because it does seem like maybe the royal family, they are preparing for something to come out. It would seem that way, perhaps. There are also a lot of small connections mentioned in Virginia's book as well. On page 116 of her memoir, Virginia details having interacted with The Simpsons creator, Matthew Groening. She alleges that he was riding on Epstein's private jet, which has been confirmed by flight logs, that Matt was on his flight February 23rd, 2001. So that's not alleged. But Virginia states, I just recall that Epstein required me to massage Groening's feet, which were calloused and sweaty and in terrible shape. I did as I was told, as usual, tempering my disgust with the knowledge that I'd now met the genius who'd invented the dysfunctional family, Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie Simpson that helped me survive my own family. Before we touched down, Groening kindly drew me 2 sketches that I asked him to sign for my little brother and my dad. I never had any sexual contact with Groening. It seems that Matt Groening was arranged to fly with Epstein by his agent, and he has crusty feet, but that seems to be really his only connection. It doesn't seem like he has any other strong connections as of right now. So it doesn't seem like he's a reoccurring person in the world of Epstein. Then there's disgraced actor Kevin Spacey. Virginia details in her book that she wasn't on this flight, but she knew that Epstein and Ghislaine were preparing to fly to Africa on Epstein's private jet with a bunch of high-profile people. Chris Tucker, actor, Kevin Spacey, actor, and former President Bill Clinton. More on Bill Clinton later, but Kevin Spacey recently released a statement on X. Release the Epstein files, all of them. For those of us with nothing to fear, the truth can't come soon enough. I hate to make this about me, but the media already has. I mean, the media barely has, but okay. However, I will note that he has not been accused of wrongdoing in direct connection with Epstein. But also, I believe that he's gay, so I don't think that he's... I don't know. I don't think that Epstein has had any... Okay, so Kevin Spacey was accused by many male actors in the industry that he had harmed them when they were children. He has been acquitted. And there's just a lot of... Kevin Spacey is a whole rabbit hole of its own, so I'm not really going to touch that. But Spacey states that he traveled with Epstein and President Clinton and Chris Tucker to Africa for Clinton's advocacy tour, which... could make sense. Chris Tucker also states that he went to a trip to Africa for this advocacy tour because when a former president calls you to come for an advocacy tour, you just kind of go, right? You don't really... And it does seem that Chris Tucker is not really immersed in the Epstein world in any way. So a lot of people don't necessarily associate him with Epstein in that context. A surprising name to come up in the book, however, is well-known actor George Clooney. Virginia states that Ghislaine would brag about, quote, enjoyed repeating that once at some random event, she'd taken the actor George Clooney into a bathroom and given him a blowjob. Whether it was true or not, we would never know, is what Virginia writes.
Wait, Glenn?
Yeah, Maxwell said that she went down on Clooney, and one netizen, and I'm not laughing because I think that this is funny, but I'm laughing because one netizen comments, I call bullshit. Not because I have sympathy for Clooney. I actually think he's a shit actor. This is the netizen comment. But because it doesn't pass the smell test. Why would a guy, I don't agree with the sentiment, but the comment goes, why would a guy who can have anyone in Hollywood except a BJ from a woman with a face like a Doberman suffering from a hair lip? This is just an obvious lie that defies sanity. And while I don't agree with that kind of thought process, I do agree that she does look like a Doberman sometimes. However, one name that netizens are less forgiving of is Naomi Campbell. In her deposition, Virginia states that she was forced to service Ghislaine in the south of France before Naomi Campbell's 35th birthday party. She says, "We were going to Naomi Campbell's birthday party. It wasn't at the birthday party," which Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, who is deposing Virginia, is, I think, probably a very slappable individual, but they ask. And who else was present during your supposed sexual contact with Ghislaine Maxwell on this occasion? To which immediately Virginia hits back, it wasn't supposed, it actually happened. And Ghislaine was present, Jeffrey was present, I believe Emily Taylor was also present, who was a longtime assistant for Ghislaine. They go to Naomi Campbell's birthday party. There is a picture that went viral of Virginia Giuffre at this party, surrounded by wealthy attendees. And the implication being, really? Nobody could tell that Epstein and Ghislaine are flaunting around an underage child? And while nothing implicates Naomi Campbell of any wrongdoing in this specific case, I believe that she has her own criminal back and forth. She was accused of assaulting an employee multiple times, physically. There was a lot. Okay. Naomi Campbell, I will say, is a legend in her own right. And she is undeniably beautiful and has set her own path in the modeling world. And she is innocent in the eyes of the law in this association. But her name constantly coming up with Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Sean Combs, I would imagine that that makes a lot of people very wary about her. July 2009, Epstein is released from jail after serving 13 months. So this is a huge part of why people want the files released. In 2008, an investigation is opened into Epstein. Well, actually, it's opened far before that. And Alexander Acosta, huge political figure, he basically gives Epstein the world's most insane plea deal, where he will then serve 13 months for 2 state charges of procuring a child for sex work and soliciting sex work.
I'm here to say we did what we did because we wanted to see Epstein go to jail. He needed to go to jail.
He was supposed to do a measly 18 months, but even that, clearly too harsh for a great upstanding man like Epstein. He was released in 13 months and promptly placed on house arrest. And even during this so-called prison sentence, they let him out for work release because a businessman like Epstein, a sex trafficker, business never stops. So this is why it's even more puzzling that after all of this, in 2010, there is a party hosted for Prince Andrew at Epstein's New York City townhouse. All the allegations have gone public. Well, not all of them, but he has pled guilty and he got this plea deal. And apparently CBS News anchorwoman Katie Couric, Good Morning America news anchor George Stephanopoulos were there, which people have been bringing up their name. These two people, I find it to be very reasonable that they're there, considering they are journalists who, they do tend to go into the fire to figure out who the arsonist is, right? I don't imagine that they're just hanging out with them as best buds, right? But netizens were initially very puzzled because Chelsea Handler, the comedian, was present. Now, she does clarify, I had no clue who Epstein was. And you have to remember, in 2009, the allegations were public, meaning that everyone around Epstein, in his circle, his friends, they knew what happened to Epstein. But he was not this big of a figure as we know today. So she's like, I don't know this guy. I actually went with Katie Couric. And also, we didn't stay for long. Chelsea Handler actually left because she runs into Woody Allen and his wife, Soon-Yi Previn, who was, Woody Allen was married to actress Mia Farrow, who adopted Soon-Yi Previn. And then Woody Allen divorced Mia and married Soon-Yi Previn, the little child he watched grow up. But Chelsea Handler states, so she goes there and she asks Woody Allen how he and his wife met.